There is a breathing pattern so deceptively simple that most people ignore it. Yet hidden inside it is a neurological switch capable of forcing your brain into a healing state modern science once believed required years of meditation. I'm going to say something that may sound extreme, even unsettling. This technique was quietly preserved in ancient warrior traditions and monastic rituals because it gave practitioners control over something most humans never master in their entire lifetime, the electrical rhythm of the brain itself. And for a long time, knowledge like this was treated as dangerous. Why? Because once you learn how to manipulate your brain waves deliberately, you stop being controlled by stress, fear, and the endless noise of modern life. Right now, your brain is probably trapped in what neuroscientists call the beta loop. Fast, chaotic, constantly reacting. Notifications, deadlines, anxiety, endless information streams. Your nervous system never truly shuts off. The result is predictable. Your amygdala stays hyper-alert, cortisol floods your bloodstream, and the brain loses access to the regenerative frequency known as the alpha state. Without alpha waves, something critical disappears. The brain cannot reorganize damaged neural circuits. Emotional wounds remain unresolved. The mind becomes loud, restless, scattered. But something fascinating happens when breathing follows a precise geometric rhythm. Not random breathing, not deep breathing, a very specific pattern that ancient practitioners described as the breath of the square. 4 equal phases. 4 controlled gates of oxygen and silence. Modern neuroscientists studying elite military operators discovered the same pattern being used to stabilize attention, regulate fear responses, and induce alpha wave synchronization inside the cortex. This method is now known as box breathing, but the name hides its real power. When performed correctly, it becomes a biological override switch. The moment you lock your breath into this structure, the brain begins shifting electrical patterns. Neural noise slows. The storm inside your mind begins to organize itself into a calm, coherent rhythm. And what happens next is where the real secret begins. Here is the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. Your brain was never designed for the level of stimulation you experience every single day. Endless alerts, glowing screens, constant decision-making, emotional pressure. All of it traps the nervous system in a primitive survival circuit controlled by a small almond-shaped structure buried deep in your brain called the amygdala. When this system stays activated too long, your body interprets life itself as a threat. Your breathing becomes shallow, your heart rhythm loses coherence, and your brain waves remain locked in high-frequency beta patterns, the neurological signature of stress and hypervigilance. Now here is where the story becomes strange. When neuroscientists began studying elite performers, special forces operators, deep meditators, and high-level athletes, they noticed something unusual. These individuals could deliberately shift their brains out of beta and into a calmer frequency known as alpha waves within minutes. Alpha waves are not just relaxation. They represent a unique neurological gateway where the brain becomes synchronized, efficient, and capable of deep internal repair. Think of alpha as the operating system reboot that clears corrupted processes running in the background of your mind. But how does a brain actually enter alpha? This is where breathing becomes the hidden control panel of your nervous system. Every breath you take sends mechanical signals through the lungs, which activate a massive biological communication highway called the vagus nerve. This nerve is like a fiber optic cable linking your breathing rhythm directly to your heart, your digestive system, and most importantly, your brain's emotional control centers. When the vagus nerve detects slow, symmetrical breathing patterns, it sends a powerful message upward. The environment is safe. Stand down. But random, slow breathing is not enough. The nervous system responds most strongly to rhythm and symmetry. That is why the ancient square breath pattern is so powerful. When inhale, hold, exhale, and pause all occur in equal intervals, The brain begins synchronizing electrical signals across multiple neural networks. The chaotic beta storm weakens. A quieter pattern begins emerging. And that pattern is the doorway to alpha. Now we reach the mechanism most people never see, the hidden chain reaction that turns a simple breathing rhythm into a neurological biohack. When you begin the box breathing cycle, something subtle but powerful happens inside your bloodstream. Your oxygen and carbon dioxide levels begin stabilizing instead of fluctuating wildly. Modern breathing habits, rapid, shallow, irregular, constantly push carbon dioxide too low. And when that happens, the brain interprets the signal as physiological instability. Blood vessels tighten. Neural activity becomes chaotic. The brain accelerates into survival mode. But when breathing becomes symmetrical and controlled, carbon dioxide levels stabilize. And this stability becomes a biochemical signal that the nervous system is safe. The moment that signal appears, the vagus nerve begins shifting control of the autonomic nervous system away from the stress-driven sympathetic response and toward parasympathetic dominance. This is not just relaxation, it is a neurological takeover. Heart rate begins synchronizing with breath rhythm in a phenomenon scientists call heart rate variability. When HRV becomes coherent, electrical signals traveling from the heart to the brain become more ordered and predictable. The brain receives a powerful message: the organism is stable. Inside the cortex, another transformation begins. The thalamus, the brain's central relay station, starts regulating electrical oscillations across large neural networks. Instead of millions of neurons firing chaotically, they begin synchronizing into slower rhythmic pulses known as alpha waves. Imagine a crowded stadium where every spectator suddenly begins clapping in the same rhythm. Noise becomes pattern. Chaos becomes coherence. This shift has extraordinary consequences. Cortisol production drops. Emotional reactivity fades. Regions involved in memory and creativity become more active. Even the brain's repair mechanisms accelerate because alpha states are strongly linked to neuroplastic processes within the field of neuroscience. And this is why the box breathing pattern is far more than a relaxation trick. It is a biological command sequence. Each inhale, hold, exhale, and pause is like turning a key inside the nervous system. Continue the cycle long enough, and the brain does something remarkable. It begins reorganizing itself. Now you are ready for the protocol itself, the precise sequence that turns ordinary breathing into a neurological command over your internal biology. Pay attention, because this is where most people fail. They hear about box breathing, they try it casually for 30 seconds, and they conclude nothing happened. Of course, nothing happened. The nervous system responds to precision, rhythm, and discipline. Without those elements, the switch never flips. But when the sequence is executed correctly, the brain begins entering the alpha state within minutes. First, your posture matters more than you think. Sit upright or stand with the spine naturally straight. Do not collapse your chest. The lungs must expand fully so the diaphragm can descend. Place your tongue lightly on the roof of the mouth and soften your jaw. This tiny adjustment signals the brainstem that tension is decreasing. Now bring your awareness to the breath because attention amplifies the neurological signal traveling through the vagus nerve. Now the structure begins. Inhale slowly through the nose for 4 seconds. Not aggressively, not forcefully. Imagine drawing the air downward toward the lower lungs so the abdomen expands first. This deep diaphragmatic movement stimulates vagal receptors surrounding the lungs and heart. When the inhale completes, hold the breath gently for 4 seconds. This pause is not empty space. It is the moment where oxygen exchange stabilizes and neural circuits begin recalibrating. After the hold, release the breath slowly through the nose for 4 seconds. Feel the chest soften and the diaphragm rise. Then comes the final phase that most beginners skip, the empty pause. Remain without breath for 4 seconds before beginning the next inhale. 4 seconds inhale. 4 seconds hold. 4 seconds exhale. 4 seconds pause. A perfect square. When this rhythm repeats for several minutes, breathing, heart rate, and neural oscillations begin locking into the same cadence. Inside the brain, electrical noise begins quieting and the slow synchronized patterns of alpha waves start to emerge. And once that rhythm stabilizes, the transformation becomes impossible to ignore. The first time you perform this protocol correctly, something subtle begins to change, and if you're paying attention, you will feel it within the first 3 minutes. The mind, normally restless and fragmented, begins to slow. Thoughts that were racing only moments before start spacing themselves apart, like clouds drifting across a suddenly quiet sky. This is the earliest sign that your brain is leaving the chaotic beta loop and entering the synchronized rhythm of alpha waves. It does not feel dramatic at first. In fact, the shift is almost deceptively calm. Your shoulders loosen, the pressure behind the forehead softens. Breathing feels effortless instead of forced. What you are experiencing in that moment is the nervous system sliding out of survival mode. After several sessions, the effect becomes measurable. Within the first 7 days of consistent practice, 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening, many people notice something remarkable. Emotional reactions begin slowing down. Situations that once triggered irritation or anxiety lose their intensity. This is not imagination. The brain's threat detection center, the amygdala, becomes less reactive when the vagal system repeatedly receives signals of safety through rhythmic breathing. At the same time, communication between the heart and brain grows stronger through a physiological phenomenon scientists call heart rate variability. When HRV improves, the brain receives smoother, more coherent signals from the body, allowing attention, memory, and emotional control to stabilize. But the deeper transformation begins around the 30-day mark. Neural circuits adapt to the repeated alpha state training. The brain learns that calm focus is not a rare event but a new baseline. Creativity increases, sleep quality improves, mental fatigue decreases. Many practitioners report that decisions become clearer and intuition sharper because alpha synchronization allows distant brain regions to communicate more efficiently within the vast network studied by modern neuroscience. At this stage, box breathing stops feeling like an exercise. It becomes something else entirely. It becomes a daily neurological reset. Now you understand why something as simple as breathing was once treated like guarded knowledge. Control the breath, and you influence the nervous system. Influence the nervous system, and you begin altering the electrical language of the brain itself. Most people spend their entire lives reacting to stress signals they do not even realize are controlling them. Their breathing becomes shallow, irregular, unconscious. And with that unconscious breath comes an unconscious mind, one permanently trapped in survival patterns. But the moment you deliberately structure your breathing, something profound happens. You take back control of the command center that regulates emotion, attention, and recovery. Every cycle of box breathing sends a clear signal through the vagus nerve, telling the brain that the environment is stable. When this message repeats again and again, the threat circuits governed by the amygdala begin quieting down. Neural networks stop firing chaotically. Instead, they synchronize into the smooth electrical rhythm of alpha waves, the same brain state observed in elite meditators, peak performers, and individuals capable of extraordinary focus. This is the biological doorway where emotional healing, cognitive clarity, and neural repair all become possible. So here is the challenge I leave you with: not a theory, not motivation, a direct experiment. For the next 7 days, practice the box breathing protocol for 10 minutes every morning and 10 minutes before sleep. Inhale 4 seconds. Hold 4 seconds. Exhale 4 seconds. Pause 4 seconds. Maintain the square rhythm without rushing, without distraction. Watch what happens to the storm of thoughts that normally fills your mind. Observe how quickly tension dissolves when the breath becomes structured and intentional. Most people will hear this information and do nothing. That is the predictable outcome. But if you actually test the protocol, you may discover something unsettling and empowering at the same time. Your brain was never out of control. It was simply waiting for the right signal.